It was around 9 p.m. when she walked into the living room. I had the TV on, half watching some show, and she stood there for a moment holding her phone like she was deciding something important. I felt it in the air before she even opened her mouth. "Hey, babe," Emily said, voice casual, too casual. "I'm going out tonight." I looked at her. Emily, my wife of 6 years, stood there in her coat, hair freshly styled like she was heading to some kind of high-end cocktail party. But there was no party. I knew she wasn't supposed to have plans tonight. Out where? I asked, playing it calm, even though something inside me twisted. She usually went out with her friends on the weekends, but tonight was different. Midweek. Random. No heads up. She paused, gave me this strange look I couldn't read, then went, "I'll be staying the night with someone." My heart stopped. What the hell did she just say? "Who?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. But she was already moving, picking up her keys from the counter, acting like this was the most normal thing in the world. Does it matter? Does it matter? I got up from the couch, staring at her in disbelief, but she didn't slow down. She didn't even look at me directly. It was like she was operating on autopilot, a version of her I didn't know. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of what I just heard, but I couldn't keep up. She gave no explanation, no guilt, no excuses, just that damn line. "I'll be staying the night with another man." And then, like some cheap scene out of a bad movie, she was gone. She left, just like that. No argument, no screaming match, no fight. The door shut behind her, leaving this echo of silence in the house that felt too loud, almost deafening. For a few minutes, I just stood there, staring at the door. There was something eerie about how calmly she walked out. Like this was already decided and there was nothing I could do. My hands were shaking, and I hadn't even processed yet whether to be pissed off or just devastated. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room, and I couldn't breathe. Then the real twist hit me. I wasn't gonna just sit there. Not this time. She thought she could just walk out and I wouldn't question a thing? I grabbed my phone, keys, and my jacket. My chest was pounding, adrenaline kicking in like a jolt to my system. There was no way in hell I was letting this play out without answers. I was gonna follow her. I threw on my jacket, moving fast, the adrenaline burning away the numbness. My brain was screaming, "What the hell are you doing?" But my legs kept moving. This wasn't some scene you just let play out. My wife had just told me she was staying the night with another man, and then waltzed out the door like it was nothing. She didn't even try to hide it. That's what hit me the hardest. It was like she didn't care enough to even cover her tracks. She left it there like a challenge, and I wasn't about to let that slide. I stepped outside into the cold, and there she was, walking to her car like she had all the time in the world. I stayed in the shadows of our driveway, watching as she got in, the headlights of her car flicking on, cutting through the dark. She reversed out of the driveway, and I slipped into my own car, engine rumbling to life. I kept my distance, not even sure how far I'd take this, but I needed to know where she was going. Who the hell was this guy? As we hit the main road, I kept a few cars behind, but close enough to keep her in my sights. I was tense, hands gripping the wheel, my eyes locked on her taillights. She turned left, then right, weaving through familiar streets, and a part of me thought, maybe she's going to a friend's place? Maybe this is all some messed up misunderstanding. But when she pulled into a hotel parking lot, everything inside me went ice cold. I parked a few rows back, engine still running, staring at her through the windshield. She got out, casually checking her phone as she headed for the entrance. No hesitation. She didn't look back once. The lights of the hotel cast long shadows across the parking lot, and I felt my chest tightening, like the walls of my world were closing in. I sat there, frozen, not sure what to do next. My mind was spinning. I wanted to charge in after her, grab her by the arm, demand answers. But another part of me wanted to sit there, take a deep breath, and try to piece together what the hell had gone wrong. How had we ended up here? In a hotel parking lot, with my wife meeting some stranger like she didn't even care about me or our life together. Just as I was about to make a decision, I saw it. A guy walked out from the lobby doors. Tall, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, probably early 30s. He had the stupid smile on his face, and there she was, walking right up to him. They hugged, standing too close for it to be anything innocent. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat as I watched them, like I was a stranger in my own life. This wasn't Emily. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. This wasn't us. And then, just like that, they disappeared into the hotel together. For a second, I thought I'd black out from the rage boiling inside me. My fists clenched around the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I felt like everything I'd ever believed about our marriage had just been ripped apart in front of me. This wasn't a mistake, wasn't some drunken misunderstanding. This was planned. She had walked out on me to meet another man at a hotel. Cold, calculated, and shameless. I got out of the car before I even knew what I was doing, slamming the door behind me, walking straight toward the entrance. My feet were moving faster than my mind could keep up with. I didn't care about being quiet or sneaky anymore. What was the point? They were inside together, and I was going to end this here. The automatic hotel doors slid open with a quiet whoosh, but inside, it felt like my heart was pounding loud enough to drown it all out. I stormed past the front desk, ignoring the receptionist's polite, "Can I help you?" and headed straight for the elevators. They'd gone up, I was sure of it. I didn't know which floor, but I knew Emily. She was the type who'd book something on the top floor, trying to make it all feel special. And it hit me, this wasn't new for her. The calm way she'd walked out, the confidence in how she met this guy, like they'd done this before. The thought made my blood boil even hotter. I jabbed the elevator button repeatedly, like it'd make the thing move faster. The doors finally opened, and I stepped in, feeling that moment of eerie calm you get right before you do something you know is going to explode. The silence inside the elevator was suffocating. Each floor dinged by slowly, each second dragging out the tension in my chest. When I reached the top, I stepped out, looking down the long, dim hallway. It was quiet, too quiet. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was locked in, focused on one thing. I was going to confront her. I had to. There was no way I could go back home and pretend this didn't happen. I couldn't unsee what I'd just witnessed. I walked down the hall, my footsteps heavy on the carpet, and as I passed door after door, something in me snapped. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was furious, the kind of fury that burns through any rational thought. She had lied to my face, taken her bag, and walked out of our home to be with another man, without a shred of guilt. The worst part was, she didn't care that I knew. That smug, careless way she had told me, like I didn't even matter, still echoed in my head. I reached the end of the hall and stopped. Room 812. I stared at the door, my breath coming hard and fast now. I knew they were inside. I could almost feel the betrayal radiating from behind that door, and I clenched my fists at my sides, fighting the urge to just kick it open. But I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet. Not until I saw the look on her face. I knocked hard. The sound echoed through the hallway, and for a second, I stood there, not even sure what I'd say. Maybe I didn't need to say anything. Maybe the sight of me at the door would be enough to blow this whole thing up in her face. I heard movement inside. My pulse quickened. A few seconds later, the door cracked open, just enough for me to see her. Emily. Her eyes widened the second she saw me. There was no mistaking it. She was caught. But instead of guilt or shock, her face twisted into something else. Something I didn't expect. Annoyance. She didn't even open the door all the way. Just stared at me through the small gap, as if I were some inconvenience she hadn't planned for. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low and sharp, like I was the one who had crossed a line. "What the hell am I doing here?" I shot back, my voice rising. "What the hell are you doing here?" She rolled her eyes, like I was some idiot bothering her on her day off. "I told you where I was going," she said, still holding the door half shut. "You didn't listen. That's your problem, not mine." My problem? Was she serious right now? "You told me you were staying with another man," I said, stepping forward, trying to push the door open, but she held it firm, blocking me from coming inside. "You think that's something I'm just supposed to accept? That I'm going to sit at home while you're here, doing—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. My throat tightened with the disgust of it all. Emily sighed like she was tired of this already. "Look, it's none of your business. I don't have to explain myself to you." Couldn't believe it. The arrogance, the complete lack of remorse. She didn't even try to deny it, didn't try to spin some lie. No excuses, just pure, cold indifference. My blood was boiling. I pushed harder on the door, but she stepped back, finally letting it swing open. And there he was, the guy from the lobby, standing in the middle of the room, casually slipping his watch back on, like he hadn't just been part of tearing my life apart. He didn't even look embarrassed, just uninterested, like I was some background noise he didn't care about. "What's up, man?" he said with a shrug, barely even glancing my way, like I was just a mild inconvenience. That was it. That was the moment everything broke. All the pain, the confusion, the rage, it all came pouring out at once. I stepped toward him, fists clenched, ready to tear him apart. But Emily stepped in front of me, blocking my way with this cold, angry stare. "Don't," she warned, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You don't get to be angry. You don't get to act like the victim here." Victim? I choked on the word, completely stunned by her words. "You lied to me, you walked out on me, and now I'm standing here watching you with this piece of SHT asterisk, and I'm supposed to just be okay with it? You're pathetic," she spat, her word to defend herself. There was no guilt, no shame, just a sense of finality, like I was an inconvenience she was already done with. And I couldn't comprehend it. How did we get to this point? How did she get to this point? But then, right there, something inside me snapped. The part of me that still clung to hope, that thought maybe this was a nightmare I could wake up from, shattered completely. She had made it clear. I wasn't even a factor in her life anymore. The Emily I thought I knew was gone. This woman in front of me, who had once promised me love and loyalty, was a stranger. A cold, heartless stranger who didn't care if I burned alive right there. "You really don't give a damn, do you?" I asked, my voice low, shaking. I could barely recognize myself. It was like I was watching from outside my own body, the fury and disbelief twisting together into something I couldn't control. Emily folded her arms, rolling her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "I've told you before, this isn't working. You just never wanted to listen. So I moved on. Moved on." I laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. You don't move on by sneaking off to hotel rooms with another guy while you're still married. You didn't even have the guts to end things properly. You just left. "Because I was done," she said, her voice steady. "I've been done for a long time, but you wouldn't accept it. So yeah, I found someone else. I didn't owe you an announcement." She made it sound so simple, like I was the one who was unreasonable for expecting basic decency. My fists clenched at my sides, and I took a step closer, trying to keep myself from exploding. "You couldn't even respect me enough to end it? You had to sneak around, lie to my face, and then walk out like I was nothing? That's how little I meant to you." For a second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just annoyance. But then it was gone. She shrugged, her voice casual and cruel. "You were convenient. That's it. Convenient." The word hit me like a punch to the gut. All the years we spent together, the moments I thought meant something, just convenient to her. I felt a coldness settle into my bones, replacing the anger with something darker. There was no coming back from this. "You could have left. You could have told me," I said, my voice shaking. "But instead, you chose to tear everything apart in the worst way possible." She rolled her eyes again, exasperated. "God, you're so dramatic. You act like this is some huge betrayal. People fall out of love. It happens. Grow up." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't the woman I'd built my life around. She was selfish, cold, and I'd been blind to it for too long. Then, the guy, the one who had just been standing there like none of this mattered, decided to speak up. "Look, man, it's not that deep. People move on. It sucks, but it happens." It wasn't the words. It was the casual, almost bored way he said it, like this was just another Tuesday for him. Like the destruction of my marriage, my life, was nothing but a minor inconvenience. I could feel the rage bubbling back up, hotter this time, and before I knew what I was doing, I took a step toward him, fists tightening. "You stay the hell out of this," I snapped, my voice dangerously low. "This is between me and my wife." But Emily stepped in front of him, like she was defending him. "Don't even think about it," she said, her voice hard, warning. "You're not going to make a scene. Not here." I stopped, glaring at her. A scene? You're worried about a scene after all this? After you walked out on me, lied to my face, and stood here defending this guy. She didn't flinch. I'm worried about you making a fool of yourself. But then again, you're good at that. That was it. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this, no salvaging anything from the wreckage she had caused. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who didn't even see me as human anymore. Just an obstacle in her new, shiny life with this guy. I backed up, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. My hands fell to my sides, the fight draining out of me. There was nothing left to fight for. She had destroyed it all. Fine, I said quietly, my voice hollow. You win. I'm done. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe it was surprise, maybe relief, but it didn't matter anymore. Nothing she did or said mattered. I turned around and walked out, leaving her and that guy in their hotel room, in their little bubble of betrayal. As I walked out into the cold night, something shifted inside me. The anger was still there, but it wasn't burning anymore. It was like embers, simmering just under the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. But I was done with them, done with her. The only thing left now was to decide how I was going to burn it all down. That I got in my car and slammed the door shut, the thud echoing through the empty parking lot. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought the leather would tear. I could still see the hotel in my rearview mirror, that sterile, emotionless building that now felt like the graveyard of my marriage. Emily was up there, with him, probably not even thinking twice about what had just happened. I sat there, engine idling, staring straight ahead. I didn't move, didn't even blink. My mind was blank, like everything inside me had short-circuited. The fury that had consumed me in that room was now replaced by a suffocating emptiness. I didn't even know what to feel anymore. Anger? Sadness? Betrayal? It all blended together into a heavy, crushing weight. She had killed our marriage with one sentence. I'll be staying the night with another man. And I had stood there, helpless, while she twisted the knife over and over. How had I let it get this far? How had I missed the signs, the lies, the way she had slowly slipped away from me? But no, this wasn't about missing signs. This wasn't about me being blind. This was about her selfishness, her cruelty, the way she treated me like I was some obstacle in her way. She had walked all over me, and I had let her. But not anymore. Something had changed in me the moment I walked out of that room. The sadness was still there, the pain, the loss. But there was something else now, something colder. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. I had half a mind to call her parents, tell them exactly what their precious daughter was up to. But then I realized I didn't care about them either. I didn't want anyone's pity, didn't want anyone telling me how sorry they were for me. No one could fix this. No one could make this right. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, landing on the one person who had always been brutally honest with me. My best friend, Jason. He'd seen through Emily long before I had. I hated that he was right all along, but I needed to hear his voice, needed someone to ground me before I spun out of control. I hit dial and he picked up after 2 rings. "Hey man," he said, sounding half asleep. "What's up? Everything okay?" The second I heard his voice, everything came pouring out. The hotel, the guy, Emily's cold indifference, the way she had basically thrown our marriage in the trash. I talked faster than I could think, not even sure if I was making sense. By the time I was done, I was out of breath, and there was silence on the other end of the line. Jason finally spoke, his voice low and serious. "Dude, I don't even know what to say. That's messed up. But listen, are you okay? Where are you right now?" "I'm in my car, outside the hotel. I didn't know where else to go." He paused, and I could hear the gears turning in his head. "You need to get out of there, right now. Don't sit outside that place, man. It's only gonna mess with your head more. Come over. We'll figure this out. But first, get the hell away from that hotel." I knew he was right. Sitting there, staring at the place where she was betraying me wasn't going to help. It was only going to make the fury grow, and I didn't trust myself to keep it in check. So I put the car in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving that miserable place behind me. The drive to Jason's was a blur. The city lights smeared past me, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, replaying every word, every detail of the night. The way she had looked at me with such disgust, like I was beneath her. The way that guy had just stood there, smug and careless, like he didn't give a damn that he was tearing my life apart. When I finally pulled up in front of Jason's house, he was already waiting at the door. I barely made it inside before the weight of everything collapsed on me. The second I stepped over the threshold, the adrenaline wore off, and the exhaustion hit me like a freight train. I didn't even make it to the couch before I sank to the floor, my head in my hands. Jason sat down next to me, silent at first, just letting me catch my breath. He didn't push, didn't ask me to talk. He just sat there, his presence steady, like an anchor keeping me from drifting too far into the storm. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice calm. "You did the right thing by walking away, man. There's nothing you could have done in that room that would have made this better. I feel like I should have done something more." I muttered, my voice raw. "I don't know, punched the guy? Screamed at her? Anything." He shook his head. "No, that's what they wanted. They were trying to bait you, make you lose it. If you'd snapped, they would have twisted it, made you the bad guy. You walked out with your dignity. That's more than she deserves." I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't feel dignified. I felt broken, hollow, like everything I'd built with her had been swept away in a single night. "What the hell do I do now?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Do I just let her get away with this?" Jason's face hardened. "No, she doesn't get to just walk away clean. You have options. Divorce her, take her to court. Make sure she knows she messed with the wrong guy. But whatever you do, don't let her crawl back into your head. That's how she wins." I sat there, his words sinking in, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a spark of clarity. Jason was right. I had to act, but not out of anger or desperation. This wasn't just about what Emily did anymore, it was about how I was going to take back control. "She's not going to win," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "Not this time." Jason clapped a hand on my shoulder. "That's the spirit. We'll figure this out. But first, you need to sleep. You've been through hell tonight." I knew he was right, but as I lay there on his couch later that night, staring up at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. She wanted to tear me apart, fine, but I'd be the one who walked away with my head held high. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. Lying there on Jason's couch, the dull ache in my chest was still there, but now it was sharper, more focused. The pain had turned into something else, something that made me want to act, to take control. The shock of Emily's betrayal had worn off, and now all I could think about was how I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. She thought she'd already won, thought she could move on like I was some forgotten chapter in her life, but she was wrong. I sat up, rubbing my face, still feeling the weight of the night before, but there was a plan forming in my head now. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about taking back control of my life, my house, my future. Emily had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Jason was already in the kitchen brewing coffee. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first, just slid a mug across the counter. "How you feeling?" he asked finally, leaning back against the counter. "Not good," I admitted, taking a sip of the coffee, the bitterness snapping me awake. "But better than last night. I've been thinking, I can't just sit around and wait for her to screw me over again. I need to act before she does." He nodded like he'd been expecting that. "You're right. She's not going to make this easy for you. And from what you've told me, she's already checked out. You have to assume she's planning her next move." I set the mug down, the wheels in my head turning. First things first, I need to lock down everything on my end. Finances, the house, everything. I don't trust her not to try to take half of what I've built. Hell, for all I know, she's been planning this for a while. Jason gave me a serious look. "Do you have a lawyer?" "Not yet, but that's my next call." We spent the next hour going over the basics, steps I needed to take, things I hadn't even thought about. Jason had always been practical, and right now that was exactly what I needed. As much as I wanted to storm back into that hotel and tear everything apart, I knew that wasn't going to help. If Emily was going to be this cold and calculated, I had to be twice as sharp. As soon as Jason left for work, I made my first call to a divorce attorney. The conversation was short, professional. I didn't tell the lawyer everything, just the essentials. I needed to file for divorce immediately, protect my assets, and make sure Emily didn't get to sink her claws into anything else. She had made it clear she didn't give a damn about me, so why should I keep playing fair? After I hung up, I felt this strange sense of calm. It was like I had finally taken my first real step toward moving forward. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was making the first move, and that felt good. It felt like I was getting a grip on things again, like I wasn't drowning in the chaos she'd left behind. But as much as I was focused on protecting myself, there was one more thing I had to do. Something personal. I wasn't just going to disappear from her life like she expected. Emily was going to feel this the way I had felt it last night. I wanted her to know I wasn't the weak, clueless husband she thought I was. I grabbed my phone and pulled up her number, hesitating for a second. Then I sent her a text, short and to the point. I filed for divorce. You can stay with him. It felt like a punch I'd been holding back finally landed. I imagined her reading it, sitting next to that guy, thinking she'd gotten away with everything, only to have her perfect little world interrupted. I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. She could have her new life, her new man, but she wasn't getting any part of me in the process. A few minutes passed. No reply. Fine by me. The silence was almost more satisfying. That evening, I headed back to the house. I knew she wouldn't be there yet. She was probably still with him, pretending like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As I walked through the door, the place felt different. Empty, but not in a bad way. It was like the weight of her presence was gone. The suffocating tension that had filled our house for months had finally lifted. I went through the rooms, gathering up anything of hers that was still lying around. Her clothes, her books, her stupid little knickknacks that cluttered the place. I threw them all into a box, each item feeling like a weight being lifted off my chest. This was my space now. I was reclaiming it piece by piece. As I packed away the last of her things, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text. I knew it was her before I even picked it up. Emily, we need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Now she wanted to talk? Now that I'd made it clear I wasn't playing her game anymore? Too late for that. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could manipulate me again. Let her squirm. Let her wonder what my next move was. She had no power here anymore. I set the phone down and grabbed the box of her things, heading for the front door. I had no intention of letting them sit in my house any longer. I was done with her, done with the lies, the betrayal, the games. I was ready to burn every last bridge if that's what it took. And as I threw the box into the trunk of my car, I felt it, the first real taste of freedom. She wasn't going to win. Not this time. I drove across town with the box of her stuff rattling in the trunk, the streetlights flickering by like quiet spectators. My hands gripped the wheel, tighter than I needed to, but it was the only thing grounding me at this point. Emily's text, "We need to talk," was playing over and over in my head like some stupid, mocking echo. Now she wanted to talk? Now that I'd filed for divorce? I wasn't stupid. This wasn't about reconciliation. She wasn't sorry. She'd never be sorry. This was about control, about her trying to regain the upper hand now that she realized she wasn't in charge anymore. But I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her game. I had already decided. I was done being her pawn. The plan was simple. Drop her stuff off at her friend's place. Her best friend, Claire, lived about 10 minutes away, and I figured Emily would end up there sooner or later. Claire always had her back, no matter how messed up things got. They were close in that way where loyalty trumps morality. I didn't care. Claire could take all her stuff and keep her as far from me as possible. When I pulled up in front of Claire's house, I grabbed the box from the trunk and walked it up to the porch. It was heavier than I thought, like it carried the weight of everything I was leaving behind. I rang the doorbell, waiting. A minute passed, then another. The door finally opened, and there she was, Claire, standing there with that same fake sympathetic look she always gave me. She knew. She probably knew everything even before I did. "Jake," she said, her voice soft like I was some wounded animal. "What's going on?" "I'm done," I said, cutting straight to the point. "Here's her stuff. Make sure she gets it." Her eyes flickered between me and the box. "You're really doing this? You're just walking away?" I almost laughed. Walking away? If only it had been that easy. She made her choice. I'm just clearing out the rest of it. Claire hesitated, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. I'll make sure she gets it. Good. I turned and started walking back to my car, but before I could make it off the porch, her voice stopped me. She never thought you'd actually do it, you know? She didn't think you'd be the one to leave. I froze. There it was, the truth slipping out in a moment of honesty. Emily thought she had me wrapped around her finger, thought I'd keep hanging on no matter what she did. Well, she was wrong. I said over my shoulder without looking back. I'm not waiting around for her to destroy what's left. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving Claire and all that baggage behind. The streets were quieter now, emptier, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was actually moving forward, literally and figuratively. But as I turned onto the main road, my phone buzzed again. Another text. I didn't want to look at it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was from Emily again. Meet me at the house. Now. I clenched my jaw, tempted to ignore it, but something in me needed to see this through. I needed closure, one way or another, even if it meant one last face-to-face confrontation. She wasn't going to get to slink away into the shadows without feeling some kind of consequence. I swung the car around and headed back toward the house. The entire drive, I kept thinking about what she could possibly want to say. What could she have left to explain? Maybe it was an attempt to twist the knife one last time. Maybe she thought she could guilt me into staying in this wreckage she'd created. Either way, I wasn't walking in there blind. I had my defenses up now. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. She hadn't even bothered to go back to the hotel or wherever she'd spent the night. She was waiting for me, leaning against the side of her car, arms crossed, eyes cold and calculating. Gone was the carefree, reckless woman from last night. This was a different Emily, one who was ready to fight. But I wasn't the same Jake who'd stood there like a deer in headlights, either. I got out of the car, shutting the door a little harder than necessary, and walked up to her. Neither of us spoke at first. We just stood there, the tension thick between us. Finally, she broke the silence. So, divorce. Her voice was sharp, a mix of anger and disbelief. That's how you're handling this? I stared at her, completely unfazed. What did you expect? You told me you were staying with another man. You think I'm just going to sit around and wait for you to decide when you're done? She pushed off the car, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with irritation. You're overreacting. This isn't how I thought things would go. We were supposed to work through this. We've been together for years, Jake. You don't just throw that away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Work through this? Emily, you walked out on me to meet some guy at a hotel. You didn't even bother hiding it. What exactly were we supposed to work through after that? She huffed, like I was being unreasonable. It's not that simple. We've been drifting apart for months. You just didn't see it. I needed something different, something new. But that doesn't mean I didn't care about us. You needed something new? I repeated, the disbelief settling in. And what? I was just supposed to sit back and wait for you to get it out of your system. Is that the kind of relationship you thought we had? She glared at me, her eyes narrowing. You're acting like I'm the only one at fault here. You haven't exactly been present, Jake. You buried yourself in work. You didn't even notice when I started pulling away. This isn't just on me. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. You're unbelievable. You think this is about me not being around enough? That justifies everything you've done? You couldn't even be honest with me, and now you're trying to turn it around like I'm the bad guy. She threw her hands up, frustration boiling over. I'm not saying it's all your fault, but don't pretend you're some innocent victim in this. Relationships are complicated. People change. I've changed. I stood there, feeling the last threads of our connection snap. There was no saving this, no coming back, and I didn't want to. You're right, I said finally, my voice calm, colder than I intended. You have changed, and so have I. I'm done fighting for something you already threw away. Her expression shifted, like she hadn't expected that. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, like she realized she'd miscalculated. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not again. This was the end, and I wasn't backing down. So what now? she asked, her voice quieter, almost unsure. Now, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You get your stuff and you move out. We're done, Emily. For good. Her face hardened again, the vulnerability gone in an instant. She knew it was over. There was no coming back from this. Fine, she snapped, turning on her heel and heading for the door. I'll pack my things. But don't think this is the last you'll hear from me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. This game of hers was over, and she knew it. As I watched her walk into the house, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The house was dead quiet once she walked inside, the air thick with the finality of everything that had just happened. Emily went straight to the bedroom without a word, and I didn't follow. I just stood in the living room, leaning against the wall, letting the silence settle around me. It was strange, how peaceful it felt now that I'd finally said the words I'd been holding in. We're done. There was no going back. I heard her moving around upstairs, opening and closing drawers, the faint sound of her phone ringing. Probably calling Claire to come help, maybe even that guy. I didn't care. Let her pack. Let her go. This was the moment where it all ended, and for once I wasn't angry. There was no rage left, no bitterness eating me up inside, just a heavy kind of relief, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty space that used to feel so suffocating. I remembered all the nights we'd spent here, watching TV, laughing, planning our future. It all felt like a different life now, a life I couldn't even recognize anymore. The weight of the last few months hit me all at once. How long I'd been pretending everything was fine, how I'd ignored all the cracks in the foundation of our marriage, hoping they'd somehow fix themselves. But nothing could fix this. And the truth was, I didn't want to fix it anymore. After about half an hour, I heard her coming back down the stairs, her footsteps fast, purposeful. When she appeared at the doorway, she was holding 2 bags, her face set in a cold, indifferent expression. She didn't look at me, not directly. She just stood there for a second, as if waiting for me to say something, maybe expecting some last-minute fight, some plea for her to stay. But there was nothing left to say. No more games, no more words. We both knew it was over. I'll send someone for the rest of my stuff, she said, her voice flat. I don't want to come back here again. Good, I replied, not even looking at her. Neither do I. She hesitated, just for a second, like she might say something more. But then she turned and walked out the door, bags in hand, leaving the house and our life behind her. The sound of the door clicking shut was like a final, irreversible moment, the punctuation mark at the end of a story that had dragged on far too long. I didn't get up to watch her drive away. I didn't need to. I knew this was it. She was gone. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing, letting the reality of it all sink in. Emily was out of my life now, and though it felt strange, it also felt right. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time, and I was just too blind to see it. But now, with her gone, it was like I could finally breathe again. The house felt bigger, lighter, like a weight had been lifted off the walls themselves. Eventually, I stood up and walked through the house, noticing how empty it felt without her things. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was calming. I wandered into the bedroom, where she had packed up the last of her things, the closet half empty, the drawers pulled open but bare. Her scent still lingered faintly in the air, but it didn't bother me the way I thought it would. It was just another reminder of what used to be, something I could finally leave behind. I opened the window, letting the cool night air wash over the room, as if I was clearing out the last remnants of her. The divorce papers were already in motion, and soon, everything would be final. The life we had built would officially be dissolved. But in my mind, it was already over. It had been over the second she walked out that door to meet him. Later that night, I sat down at the kitchen table, a beer in my hand, staring out into the quiet street. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of the future pressing down on me. But this time, it didn't feel terrifying. It felt open, like a blank page waiting for me to write the next chapter. I wasn't sure what would come next. There was still so much to figure out, all because I was afraid of facing the truth. If there was one thing I could tell anyone going through something like this, it would be this: don't wait until it's too late. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone else control your life, your happiness. If they don't respect you, if they're lying to you, walk away. You deserve better. I stood up, tossed the empty bottle in the trash, and looked around the house one last time. Felt different now. Not a reminder of what I'd lost, but a symbol of what I'd gained. Freedom, clarity, a future where I wasn't constantly questioning if I was enough. And as I walked upstairs, ready to collapse into bed, I smiled to myself for the first time in a long while. Emily was gone, but I was still here. And for the first time, that felt like enough.